We'd like to thank, hello everyone. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for the Sickle Cell Awareness Zoom program presentation. It's a truly good evening for us to have you share the information that we're going to give to you tonight, and hope that you will learn a lot of information and share this information with others. I am Denise Blackpoon, your MC for this program. I am the second Vice President of Top Ladies of Distinction and the first Vice President for Programs for the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Club, Toledo Club, as well as a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. This Zoom presentation is open to the public, and we hope that everyone has brought their friends and their loved ones, and that they can listen to the things that we say and share this information. To begin our program, the president of the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Club, Tyra Banks, was prepared to bring a special greetings for you today, but we ask that each of you send your prayers and love to her in the passing of her father. We now have prepared for you a special welcome from our immediate past president of National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Club, Dr. Frances Collins. Thank you, Dr. Collins, for being with us today.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and we are really appreciative that you were able to join us tonight, and we hope that the information will be very informative and you will share the information with others. This is very personal to me because my nephew passed from sickle cell anemia several years ago. So it's just something that you never get over. The Toledo Club of the NAN BPWC are very happy that you are joining us virtually tonight. And we hope that you will share the information and it will be meaningful to you. So with that being said, just take in the information and share it. Thank you very much for coming and being with us tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Collins.
Mm-hmm.
As we move on, we have logistics from Claire Hetty, who is the first Vice President of Top Ladies of Distinction Toledo Chapter, and she will bring you the protocol for this Zoom presentation today.
Good evening. So we're going to have a little logistics. As we start our program today, we would like everyone to please feel free to use our chat box to ask questions, and we hope that we can get to every one of those questions tonight. Send your questions to myself, Clara Petty, or Cassandra Adams. We ask that you mute your phones when presenters are speaking and try to eliminate any background noise, interruptions, or people walking through your background. Please take notes and feel free to pass this information on sickle cell to other family members or friends to help us bring awareness in this community. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. And next we will have Denise Blackpoon to bring you the purpose of today's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. The members of this collaboration would like you to know that there are many health issues that we all face, and sickle cell is one of the major health problems that we have that we all share as organizations. September is Sickle Cell Awareness Month, and what a better way to take time out to be with you and share this health issue about sickle cell. Our collaborating clubs are wearing maroon and red in honor of the Sickle Cell Month. These organizations have collaborated with each other to help you find ways to bring awareness on sickle cell in hopes that you can learn about the health issues that anyone with sickle cell faces and give direction, and also where to get help and questions that you might need to ask, and also how to deal with sickle cell and so much more. During this time of COVID, we hope that this Zoom presentation will help you be aware and reach out to those and touch each other's hearts with the understanding to help them through this sickle cell process, and also what they go through each day with this disease. Please think about which person they may be or yourself and say, Am I living with sickle cell? Do I care for someone that's living with sickle cell? Do I have the sickle cell trait? And as a sickle cell person, are you an advocate? What is your role for sickle cell? This collaboration team all share common needs and hope that others in our community will be able to share these needs as well. They consist of women from many organizations who work hard every day to bring awareness to the community and the world in which we live. These organizations are the adult and youth clubs of the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Club, Toledo Club, and Maumee Bay. Top Ladies of Distinction, Toledo Chapter, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Zeta Alpha Omega and Alpha Lambda chapters, YWCA of Northwest Ohio, the National Sorority of Phi Delta Kappa Beta Gamma chapter, ABC Healthcare, the National Sorority of Phi Delta Kappa, and the Toledo chapter of Links, and of course, the Sickle Cell Project with our special guest, LaSharday Scott. Next on our program, we will have an introduction of our panelists by Maumee Bay Club President, Patty Poston, and then Linda Collins and Brenda Halsey. Patty.
Thank you, Denise. I too would like to welcome you to our program this evening. I am looking forward to getting more information regarding sickle cell. And I have the opportunity of introducing two of our panelists this evening. First is Eric Scott. Eric has an MBA and is an environmental scientist and is currently the Wood County Park District Stewardship Coordinator. He is the proud husband and father of 4 boys, 2 of which are sickle cell warriors. Eric is the author of the book, What Dr. Sherney Taught Me. So hopefully we're going to hear some more about that book in our presentation this evening. Next up is LaSharday Scott. She's the project director and newborn screening coordinator for Region 3 Neighborhood Health Association Sickle Cell Project of Northwest Ohio. LaSharday earned her bachelor's degree from Eastern Michigan in social work and communications. LaSharday is currently enrolled in Eastern Michigan's University's MSW program. She is a wife and mother of 3 amazing boys, a bonus mom to her stepson. She is the mother of 2 living with sickle cell disease. LaSharday has earned several awards for her work with sickle cell awareness. That's 2 of our panelists for tonight. Linda?
Good evening. I'm Linda Collins, and I am the first vice president for National the sorority of Phi Delta Kappa Incorporated, and I'm also a member of the Maumee Bay Club for Negro Business and Professional Women. I'm introducing Chris Tucson. He is a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, Beta Phi Sigma chapter, a survivor of sickle cell who underwent 2 stem cell transplants over 2 years ago. He is also the grandson of one of our own sorors, Nithian Tucson, who's always kept us informed of sickle cell. Then Dr. Stunk graduated from State University, New York, Upstate Medical University in Syracuse. He completed a fellowship in pediatrics, hematology, oncology at Rainbow Babies and Children Hospital in Cleveland. Since 2006, he has been the director of the Pediatric Comprehensive Sickle Cell and Hemoglobinopathy Clinic at ProMedica Russell J. Eber Children's Hospital. And in 2018, he became the director of the ProMedica Adult Sickle Cell Center. He is a medical advisor for Ohio Department of Health, member of the Medicine and Research Advisory Council for Sickle Cell Disease Association of America. He is married with 3 children and a diehard Star Wars football and hockey fan. Brenda?
Good evening. I am Brenda Kennard Hosey and First Vice President of the Mommy Bay Club. I have the pleasure of introducing Felicia Scott Lott Morris. She's a native Toledoan and she resides with her husband and 3 young adults. 2 are twins. Felicia is a registered nurse and she has worked in the healthcare field for the last 18 years. She's also an entrepreneur. Along with her husband, they have an online healthcare uniform accessory store for healthcare heroes, and it's called Lots of Scrubs. She has a passion for working with the elderly, the underprivileged, and the sickle cell community, spreading awareness for the sickle cell population through the education, advocation, research, and promotion has recently inspired her to join the fight after her most recent dehumanizing hospital experience. She will share later. Next, I will introduce Andre Morris Harris. He obtained a bachelor's of social work from Fayette State University. Currently, Andre is a PhD student of the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work. He's specializing in political social work, and he serves as a president of the Association of Black Social Workers University in Houston, the Houston chapter. He is an ongoing researcher. His interests and concerns are in the social political deterrent effect of sickle cell and rare diseases, especially in Black men. He serves on the executive board of the Sickle Cell Association of Houston and serves with other advisory boards for sickle cell and rare disease organizations. And he is a proud member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated.
Thank you so much. Now we want to move on with the program. We want to ask LaSharde Scott, who is a sickle cell project director and of the newborn screening coordinator for Region 3. She has a very interesting story to tell about her journey for sickle cell. So we'd like to invite her in and listen to this fabulous story that she's about to tell. LaSharde?
Yes, thanks for having me. Basically, my story is what kind of drove me to my passion for sickle cell. So in 2015, my second son was born and he was diagnosed at birth with sickle cell disease. I thought that I had did all of the planning to ensure that I didn't have children with sickle cell disease. So I was born in Michigan in '87. My husband was born in Michigan in '86. So they did not start testing every baby in Michigan until June of '87. So he missed it by a couple months. So when we had our son, Emery, I got that call from Michigan because he's a border baby. So I had him in Michigan. And I got the call stating that he had sickle cell disease and I was devastated. I felt like I had ruined his life. I thought, in my opinion, I felt like it was the end of the world because you always hear about the death sentence, patients don't live long. You hear all these negative stigmas that are associated with sickle cell disease. And then 16 months later, I had another child with sickle cell disease. So it just, here in Toledo at the time, because I was kind of going back and forth between both states, there were really not a lot of resources for me to reach out to. So I reached out to Dr. Sherney, who's in Michigan. And I just asked her to come let me shadow what she was doing so that I can kind of have a better understanding of what sickle cell disease is and how it impacts, how it impact my children moving forward. So with that being said, I started an internship with her because I had went back to school. And my husband and I had posed this idea of just writing an educational book entitled What Dr. Sherney Taught Me. And it's seen from the eyes of my 3-year-old son, because I had my older son wanted to know why his brother was in and out of the hospital all of the time. And he had just started learning how to read, my oldest son. So that was a way that my husband felt like, let's try this way, to get that information off to him. And then it just became an educational tool for some of the schools here in Toledo. So it's definitely, when we wrote the book, it was never for monetary gain. It was always just to kind of put that information out there for people to kind of have a better understanding of like what a patient would experience and typically how it kind of impacts the household. So that's how I ended up in the world of sickle cell. And now not only do I advocate for just my 2, I advocate for thousands of patients here in Northwest Ohio. So I'm working out of 11 counties to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence and I don't feel or make other families feel like they're alone, because, my son was in daycare at the time, and the person that was in my position previously, they never showed up to the school to be able to educate not only myself, but the school and the staff that was there. So I made it my duty once I got the position here to get heavily involved with the school districts, in the community, making sure that sickle cell had a name so that people knew that this was a resource that's available, and, rechartering the support group and things like that. So that was something that I really hit the ground running. I started the position here in 2018, and I just haven't stopped since. So everything I do is primarily for my children, but it's also, for the population I serve.
Well, we know that you really work hard because we see all these events and things that you're supporting for the sickle cell awareness. But we also want to join you today is her husband. It's not by design that he's here. We want him to share his story with LaSharday. Eric?
So yeah, we went through it together, so a lot of our story is the same. I'm just seeing it from a father's point of view. But seeing my wife devastated, she was real devastated when the lady didn't show up to Emory's daycare to educate about sickle cell and the teachers. So that really made her just dive into it. And me, I just kind of support her. And like she said, with the writing of the story, I was at work one day because my work doesn't pertain to sickle cell. I'm in the environmental field. I deal with land management and stuff. And I was just sitting there thinking of a way to better educate my son at the time. My son EJ was 5 at the time. I want to just convey him what was going on with his little brother, because he always had, he's a kid, he's inquisitive and have questions. So I wrote the book, and then I turned to my wife for all the education pieces to make sure all the terms and everything was correct. Just as a father, like, I try to motivate kids dealing with anything, but especially sickle cell, to the point where I'm now the current president of our sickle cell awareness of Toledo support group. So I try to advocate that way and get involved everywhere I can. A lot of times y'all might not see me at my wife's event, but I'd be there. I'd be in the shadows in the back. Most of the time I have my boys with me. That's my little crew. So that's where I'm at. I'm just supporting my wife, because this is not only what her job, but it's what she does. So I just try to hold on to my responsibility as a parent, keep her uplifted, and keep our kids uplifted as well.
Well, we appreciate all that you do. And we know it's hard because sometimes children get tired with the sickle cell. How has it affected you as you're planning, like when you go on events or vacations and things like that, because of them being tired or, getting shots and stuff all the time?
Gotta be honest, it's difficult. I definitely look at the weather more than I ever have in my life. I used to just get up and go, but now I gotta check the temperatures, and it can't just be one weather station. I got like 3 different apps on my phone. I have to know what the weather's gonna be, and I have to dress them accordingly. Just gotta be real in tune with your kids. I got to know how they looking. If their eyes are jaundiced, that means yellowish. If they looking fatigue, if it's too cold, I got to make sure that they bundled up. But it is tough because they do have to see a doctor. They have to go to the clinic every 6 to 8 weeks for a checkup, and that's for their medication that they on, which is hydroxyurea. So it's they just got to monitor their blood more often than a normal person. But it is difficult, but we plan accordingly. Me and my wife, we constantly got to link our calendars together to make sure our jobs is covered, to make sure the kids is covered, and it's just us. So we just, pray, have faith, and try to do everything in our power. Make sure they have vitamins and that they hydrated, and just go from there.
How does it affect the kids in school when they're at school?
So there's been times where we've just had to, because we don't have family here in the Toledo area. So, when one is hospitalized, which it's been quite a few years, so I'm thankful for that. But when one is hospitalized, we usually have to kind of plan accordingly to see who's going to get the other kids, or who's going to stay home, or who's going to stay at the hospital with one. We're kind of alternating. My job really allows me to be able to kind of do both. So there's been times where both of my boys were hospitalized over here, but I'm seeing clients over here. So then once I, finish with my clients, now I got to go put on my mommy hat. So I'm basically dealing with sickle cell all day, every day. Like there's no shut off button for me.
And just to piggyback on what she's saying, we very transparent. I let my supervisors know, anybody in my job that has questions or concerns, I always try to advocate and educate. We let their schools know, their teachers. If they play sports, we let their coaches know. I try to coach them a lot of the time. Just, it's just easier for me to coach than try to explain a lot of things. But we're very transparent. We got the book on what Dr. Sherney taught me. So we give that to their teachers so they can read to their classmates, so they can be better understand. And we have meetings. Whoever want to learn, we always sit down and teach them. If my wife not available, then I step up and teach them everything I know. We always have follow up in ways that they can reach us if there's any problems. Like each child has a plan that my wife has written up for the school to follow in case of emergency. And we just let them know in detail what to look for and what to expect and how we deal with them as parents.
Well, we know that your plate is full, and it's a big task of things that you have to do each day. We hope so much that the message to get out to let people know how serious this disease is, and that they will get tested as well. We want to remind everybody to put questions that they have in the chat, so that way we can ask questions if you feel that there's a need to ask a question. We're going to come back to
I just wanted to iterate something. So
Okay.
when you're saying get tested, how you do that, you can go to your physician, or you can go to the nearest, I know Cleveland Clinic does it as well. That's probably the closest for us if you can't go to your physician, but you can ask for them to run an electrophoresis to see if you are a sickle cell trait carrier, because here in Toledo, March of 1990 is when it was mandatory to test every baby. So if you were not born after March of 1990, more than likely you have not been tested.
That's very good to know. Thank you so much. Yes,
We have a question.
Cassandra, go ahead.
The question wanted to know, how does the weather affect the children?
So when it's too hot outside, dehydration definitely plays a part. That can cause them to go into a pain episode. If it's too cold, the joints, we've experienced that. Emery had a pain episode that started in his elbow. Just extreme temperatures, like even when it's 70 degrees, my kids still are kind of bundled up, to be honest with you. So it's not, their temperature is very, very different from, or they have to dress very different from someone that does not have sickle cell disease. So a lot of people probably look at us like we're crazy. They got on skull caps and gloves and, these things when it's only 70 degrees outside, but we notice that that works for them and that keeps them from being in the hospital.
Do they automatically test both parents and the child? And is
So-
it mostly African-American descent?
So now I will say doctors tend to test more Black women when they find out that they're pregnant, or they may ask that question. However, it's not just in Blacks, it's in pretty much all races, but it's just predominantly African Americans are impacted. So 1 out of 365 African Americans are diagnosed with sickle cell disease, and 1 out of 13 African Americans are diagnosed with sickle cell trait. So yeah.
Thank you. We're going to move on because we have another panelist that I'd like you to hear today. And this panelist is Andre Harris. He has a story that's very interesting that we want you to hear as well. Andre?
Good evening, everyone. How are you all? First of all, Lashardé, thank you for your personal invite and everyone that is responsible for this event. I appreciate allowing me this space. Lashardé is not only a colleague, but my sorority sister and my fellow social worker, so I appreciate that. And I think I saw another one of my fraternity brothers, Chris, on the line, so I give deference to you. I would just share, I think something that's unique, excuse me, my contact lenses. I think something that's unique to my experience is my pursuit of graduate school. And so a lot of people always ask me to talk about that. So I'll briefly mention that in contrast to me having sickle cell, but I'm actually a Michigan native, raised in the South in Georgia and North Carolina, and now I'm in Texas, in Houston in graduate school at the University of Houston. Growing up with sickle cell was a lot of pain and heartache. I had a lot of struggles as a child, and thankfully, I call it a miracle drug, but hydroxyurea is what I always say what saved my life. But my health turned around drastically after I started taking that around the age of 16. I was able to finish high school and go up to college. But unfortunately, I only did 2 years in undergrad, and because of sickle cell, I had to drop out and some other reasons. And I went back, and when I went back to school, my resolve was that I would take advantage of every opportunity that I had presented to me. And I graduated with my bachelor's degree in social work in 2019 on the dean's list with a scholarship, in a scholarship program. I was a Ronald McNair Scholar. I had traveled to Bangkok, Thailand to present research. I studied abroad in Shanghai, China. I did a lot of things that a lot of people told me I could not do because I had sickle cell disease. And a lot of people that know me know if you tell me I can't do it, you're motivating me to do it. So a lot of the things that I did in school was really just to not only prove to myself, but prove to the world that just because I have a debilitating illness does not mean that it can stop me from my dreams or my aspirations or pursuing my educational goals. And so I graduated in December of 2019, and I applied. Like I said, I was in a scholarship program in undergrad, and it prepares you and funds you to apply and become a PhD student. So I applied, and I made my decision to go to the University of Houston. I just finished my master's in social work in July, and in August I started my PhD. So I've been pushing right through. And so I try to be an example. And I also want to say as a disclaimer, because I think also it's worth mentioning, I think the idea of well, if you see so-and-so can do it, then you should do it. And people try to kill themselves to live up to other people's expectations. I want to say this before I get to my point. Just because someone else does something does not mean you have to do it, or that if you don't accomplish it, that there's a failure within you. Just because you don't do it at the age or the time where you think you should do it, does not mean that there is a failure within you. But I had to learn, and I'm still learning, that everyone has their own time, their own timeline, their own divine providence, and that you should lean into that and embrace that. So again, I graduated with my bachelor's degree at the age of 30. Everybody in my class was younger than me. Even though I looked younger than them, they were younger than me. And sometimes that did bother me, that I was the old man in class. Even now, as a PhD student, there's some people in my classes that are 21, 22 that accelerated through high school and college. And I feel like, oh, I should have did this 10 years earlier. But I am where I am because the God that I pray to allowed me to be here where I'm supposed to be. So I say that to say, even though I'm doing it and I'm trying to be an example to other people with chronic illnesses, diseases, whatever you may be facing, don't let what I'm doing make you kill yourself to try to fit some timeline. Whatever your timeline is, you lean into that. But I do want to be someone that can show you that you can do it. And if someone slams the door in your face, walk around and go through the back door. If somebody tells you no, go to someone else that would tell you yes. There's always a different avenue to get the answer that you want. If one person rejects you, there are thousands, millions, billions of other people that will say yes. So that is one of the main things that I like to highlight when we talk about sickle cell disease, because I've had so many professors and advisors and counselors that used to tell me, you know, you probably should just go. And I did. I left out the fact that I went to get my associate's degree. But a lot of people just told me you should probably just get your associates and just be satisfied with that. And I really wasn't. I didn't want anybody to predicate what my life should look like. If I wanted an associate's, and that's what I wanted. But like I said before, I think that counselor who told me that pushed me to prove her wrong. And so I actually emailed her not too long ago and told her that I was in a PhD program, just to kind of give her a little in your face moment. But I think these are our conversations that we should have, because a lot of times we cripple and put people who have sickle cell, who have chronic illnesses, in a box. And I just want to be a testimony that we are not a monolith like anyone else, any other group. We can achieve what we want to achieve just because we may have an illness that may hinder us. And I think of it this way. As a believer, we have a scripture that says that weapons may form, but they won't prosper. The weapon will form, but it may not prosper against you. So don't be afraid if the weapon forms. Yes, it's going to form, but it's not going to prosper. So I just want everyone to be encouraged, and that's why I'm here, and I appreciate the time and the space.
I just have a question. If you can give us a little insight on the medical things that you had to go through that's of importance that people should know about.
Oh, that's such a broad question, Miss Denise. I've been through. I think one thing I will say is something that I think a lot of sickle cell patients, as someone who is trained as an advocate and a counselor, is we often ignore like other organ issues like gallbladder and spleen and things like those. We really need to be vigilant and make sure that if you're a caretaker, if you're a patient yourself, that you are asking your doctor if you are on certain medications, if you are getting chronic transfusion therapy, they should be monitoring your kidneys, your liver. They should be making sure your spleen is functioning. They should be making sure that, you are not developing gallstones, that you're not developing any other complications. I did develop gallstones and my gallbladder was taken out. And that was something that was actually almost life-threatening, because we just didn't know what to look for. But thankfully, I was able to get that resolved. Another thing is acute chest syndrome. I call it a silent killer, because a lot of people, and I think we have a nurse on here. I'm a social worker, so I definitely can't give you any medical advice, but I will tell you from what I know from my training, a lot of people, practitioners, patients, caregivers, mistake acute chest syndrome for pneumonia, and that can be very, very detrimental if you think it's pneumonia. Well, first of all, pneumonia in itself can be deadly. But if you think that, the symptoms of acute chest syndrome is pneumonia and you may downplay it to it's just pneumonia, I've seen a lot of cases turn for the worse in those. So I really would admonish those. I remember, and I'll give this short anecdote. My parents told me when I was born that my doctor told me that this was in 1989, that I probably would not live any further than 21. And lo and behold, I was born in March of 2012. I think that's the wrong year, but whenever the year I turned 21 in, I ended up getting sick and I was induced in a coma for 2 weeks. Didn't know any of this was going on. I came out and 2 weeks of my life was gone. But they told me, like, my mother at the time was living in another state, flew in, they were asking her to make arrangements because I had acute chest syndrome. I didn't know what to look for. My family didn't know what to look for. My doctors didn't know what to look for. They all told me I had pneumonia before they induced me and they were going to send me home. That was the last thing I remembered. And then I woke up and I was in the ICU 2 weeks later. So that's something to kind of answer or to speak to your question. For patients, I would admonish everyone to be vigilant. Of course, you don't have to have a medical degree, but if there are questions that you have, ask them. If there's something that's bothering you, ask. If you feel sick, go to the doctor. And that's another thing is don't feel like you have to wait until your head is about to explode. Go. And this is just my personal philosophy. I would rather have $1 million in medical debt and be alive than avoid the hospital because I don't want to be in medical debt and be dead. So if you have a pain, if you have something that's unusual, go see a physician, go see a doctor, get help. Because it's much rather that we catch it early than we catch it late and can't treat it.
Well, we thank you so much, Andre, for all the medical words of wisdom that we learned a little bit more today, and we'll come back to you. But I want to get to Chris Tucson. He has a story also that he needs to tell. Chris.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Tucson, born and raised here in Toledo, Ohio, diagnosed with sickle cell at birth. My experience with sickle cell has been 4 strokes, 2 crises, pneumonia, chronic migraines, on and off numbness, like on the left side of my body due to like the strokes. I did, however, manage to finish college, have a bachelor's degree in exercise science and a minor in biology from Tennessee State University. I am a 2-time stem cell transplant survivor. The first one didn't work in 2012, 2013. And I told my doctor, I'm willing to go through it again, but you have to give me time so I can finish my education. And as soon as I graduated, I went back to school. I managed to get my degree. Even though I was told probably just like Andre, I wasn't gonna finish, but my grandmother and my parents were like, nope, you're gonna finish. So I stuck it out. I was away from home by myself for about 4.5, 5 years. And throughout that time frame, I've had to drive myself to the hospital because I thought I was dying because my chest hurt so bad, and it was pneumonia that was causing my left and right lung to be almost completely filled with mucus. And I remember calling my dad, like, I think this is it. I'm dying. I think I was going like 80 from Tennessee State to Vanderbilt Hospital. And I got out my car. I don't even think I threw it in park. I think I just hopped out and threw the valet my keys and just ran in and was like, I don't care what you say. I'm a transplant patient. Told them my doctor's name. They got me right in. And it was just, I was in there, I think, for a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. But yeah, it's just going through life with sickle cell is not an easy journey. And I live by the saying, I have the disease, it doesn't have me, which is very true. Because when you feel sorry for yourself, it actually makes your disease, it makes it worse on yourself. So I stay humble, I stay prayed up. My relationship with God is my own. I choose to worship, and faith got me through everything. I just turned 30 in July. I am helping my family run a mental health agency. I have spoken at the Red Cross on behalf of, my fraternity brother who's passed away, and just told them how thankful I was for the blood donations that they get and the work that they do in silence, honestly. But yeah, my story it's not simple, but I'm grateful for everything I've been through, and I honestly don't think I changed a thing.
Well, we're really happy to hear that you and Andre both, the fight that you fight for to achieve the things that you got to overcome this sickle cell disease. So we've got another story also to tell. This is from Felicia Lott Morris. If she wants to give her story as well, we'd like to turn it over to her. Felicia? Is she still there?
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Perfect. Well, great stories from Chris and Andre, definitely very inspirational. I was diagnosed with sickle cell at birth. I was born in 1980, and there was not a lot of education to my parents. One out of every 4 children with parents that both carry the sickle cell gene will have the disease. My parents had 4 children, and I'm the lucky one who came out with the actual disease. My parents, they didn't know a lot. They just let them know that I probably wouldn't live past my 40s and that I would probably be on Social Security. They let them know I probably wouldn't be able to have a normal job at that age. So a lot of things that was stereotypical back then, and they didn't really let them know what to expect. So I was initially diagnosed with sickle cell SC. And all my life up until this year, I turned 41 years old this year. And I've just found out I've been living my whole life with sickle cell SS. And that is very alarming. I'll explain the difference. Like with sickle cell SC is typically characterized by less sickle cell crisis. You have more healthy red blood cells versus the ones that are crescent shaped that typically cause the crisis and keep you in the hospital. And sickle cell SS is characterized typically by more of the crescent hardened shape of the cells that occludes the blood vessels and causes the pain crisis. The reason why, now that I've gotten more education and I finally found a hematologist who really is diving deep into my case and did the testing and I found out after my recent hospitalization in May that I do actually have sickle cell SS. They tested my dad back in the 1950s, and he was told he didn't even carry the trait for sickle cell. And find out when I came out with the disease, when I was tested at birth, that he did. And then he said it was the C, and that's why their testing didn't pick up on it. So, so this just goes to show just the lack of education from the beginning. I didn't have my first crisis until I was 9 years old. And at that time, my mom was pregnant with my youngest brother. And it was a great summer. I was having the time of my life, up and down the street playing with the neighborhood kids. I was always a real skinny, little scrawny little kid. I didn't eat much. I, drink when I'm thirsty. And of course it was sugary Kool-Aids and all the good stuff that I enjoyed. And when I was having that summer, it was so much fun. We were good kids. I was with my siblings. So I wasn't coming in hydrating at all. I was just outside having a good time in the heat. My parents didn't know better to tell me to, make sure. They knew I was supposed to drink water, but they just assumed I was doing it. That night, for my first crisis, when I was, that particular night, I woke up. It was the middle of the night. I just had excruciating pain over my whole body. Every joint, it was my legs, it was my arms. I knew I had this disease, but I didn't know this is what it felt like. It was the first time that I had ever experienced a pain crisis. So I went to the bathroom. I knew my dad had to be at work in the morning. I didn't want to wake him up, and I didn't want to wake my mom up. So I sat there in the bathroom and cried. And then I couldn't take it anymore because as the time went on, the pain got worse. So I did wake my mom up eventually. I was bawling out of control. By this point, she took me to the emergency room and they let her know I was in my first sickle cell crisis. I was too scared to stay at the hospital. So I wanted to go back home. And so they gave her a bottle of Percocet tablets and said, give her some Gatorade and give her these Percocet tablets. And they gave her directions on how to prescribe them to me, and they sent me home. Well, they didn't educate my mom on what addiction is and things like that. So my mom is thinking, oh my gosh, if I give her these tablets, she's gonna be like the neighborhood crackhead. She just didn't know. So she would give it to me, but she would cut the tablets in fours and give me like a fourth of a tablet and then give me some Gatorade. And it made me a little drowsy because I was not on any medication. So I would sleep a little bit, but Lord knows it was not touching the pain. So she'll come with my little Percocet crumble, another crumble, and see. And it was all bad. So obviously it didn't work. We went back to the emergency room. It didn't work so tough. I was scared of the hospital. However, I felt so awful that I wanted to go back because I was hurting so bad. So went back, they ended up admitting me and it was a scary time. And that's one of the, actually, I could say what kind of drove me into going into healthcare. My mom is in healthcare as well, and she's, one that I admire and look up to, and, one of my inspirations to be in healthcare. But it was a nurse. My mom was getting ready to deliver my brother, so she couldn't stay 24/7, and my dad had to work. So kind of like LaCharday and her husband's story, they were just trying to make it work with me and having other kids at the house. So I actually was nervous. We were raised, you don't, when you go to people's homes, you don't ask for food, you sit down, you behave. And I wasn't feeling good, but I had a nurse who would try to make me happy and, say, hey, Felicia, you want to watch a movie? You want to do this? And I said no to everything she would ask me because I just didn't want to be in the way. And I wasn't feeling good. And that night, I wish I remembered her name, but this was back when UTMC used to be, I forget what the name of them, but back in the day, UTMC was the hospital for sickle cell patients back in the 80s for the kids.
Oh, it was MCO.
MCO, there we go. Yes, back in the 80s. So that's where I was at, and this particular nurse said, hey, after 2 days of me turning her down for everything, she said, do you like milkshakes? And I said, yeah. And she said, I'm going to stay over and I'm going to make you a milkshake. And she works second shift. And I did not, I told her, no, you don't have to stay over, because I didn't want her telling my parents that she had to stay over on account of me. So she stayed over. So all the nurses were coming by and said, oh, wow, you're so lucky. She doesn't make milkshakes for anybody. And my mom was delivering my brother, so she couldn't be there. So this particular nurse stayed after. She made me a milkshake when she got off at 11 o'clock. And do you know, she crawled into bed with me, popped the movie in, let me know I was safe, and watched the movie until I fell asleep. So that was my feel-good story for, and I was like, wow, I would love to be like them. Everyone was so kind, and it was just a very stressful time for me as a child, but they made it better. Now moving to 2021, total opposite situation. Andre spoke about acute chest syndrome. So this was recent, and if I cry, I'm sorry in advance, because it's still very new, and it's it was just a really tough time in the hospital, and I'm still trying to move past it, but I'm doing it through advocacy, and I don't want anybody to experience a hospitalization like I went through. So it was the end of May, and I had woke up that morning, and I started having chest pain. And I never get chest pain. Even with my sickle cell crisis, they're usually in my arms and legs, and once I had one in my back. Other than that, my crises were pretty infrequent. So it was not getting better. I said, maybe it's heartburn or indigestion. I took some medications. It did not help. Then it started becoming intense. It was crushing chest pain. My husband is a registered nurse as well. And we both said, this might be acute chest syndrome. We knew it was a medical emergency, and we were like, you better get to the hospital. For those who don't know what acute chest syndrome is, it's essentially the sickle cells, which is the crescent shape. They they stick together and basically form a blood clot in your lungs. So it lowers your oxygen supply. Acute chest syndrome is the leading cause of death for sickle cell patients. So as Mr. Andre said, it is very deadly. It can be misconstrued for pneumonia. It clogs up the blood vessels in the lungs, so it needs immediate attention. It's nothing you can sit on. Went to the hospital, and the parking lot was packed. So my husband was like, you get out, go in, get registered, let me drive around and find some parking. I went in, and the intake person, I let her know, hey, I am having chest pain. I do have sickle cell disease. And she said, okay, and told me to have a seat. So I'm thinking, as a nurse, stat, let's get her checked out. No, they left me sitting there for over 20 minutes. And my husband came in, and he saw me sitting there. He thought I had already been checked in. And I said, no, and I'm holding my chest crying. And he jumped up. He's usually a really mild guy, but he jumped up, grabbed somebody, and said, what my diagnosis is and how deadly this can be. So the person did listen to him and hurried up and got someone to triage me. However, that was the initial of unacceptable behavior. Just a person, you don't even have to know a lot about sickle cell to know when someone's having chest pain, you treat them immediately. Once I got to the back, the care was fine. They did testing, found out it was not acute chest syndrome. I was going through a sickle cell crisis. So they admitted me to the unit. This is where things got bad. So typically treatment for sickle cell disease is typically IV pain medication, oxygen, and IV fluids. And other people may have some other combination therapy, but that's kind of like the basic standard of care. In the IV pain medicine, the thing is, like, I get Dilaudid. It works, but it works very short term. So once it wears off, you're back at stage 1. So it's important to stay on top of your pain routine, especially when you're going through a crisis, to prevent further organ damage, tissue damage, and to not prolong your hospital stay. Once I was admitted to the unit, the night shift nurse comes on, and she said, by this time it's been the 2 hours, the Dilaudid has worn off, and she said, do you want another dose of pain medication? And I answered yes. She comes in with 1 tablet, 1 Percocet. 1 Percocet is usually given for a person if they have a laceration of a finger and may need some sutures. 1 Percocet tablet. And I was really surprised as to why this is the treatment. I said, I'm here for a sickle cell crisis. Why are you offering me 1 Percocet tablet? And she said, well, we've been having too many sickle cell patients admitting to our unit. So we've been having meetings to deter sickle cell patients from coming here, where the doctors decided to give less pain medications, and then that would make them want to go seek treatment elsewhere. And I'll be honest, it took me and my husband back. So I had to ask her again to make sure I heard what she really said. And she repeated it. And she said, yes, we are having meetings about this, because we even had 1 sickle cell patient stay for 30 days. And we just, we want sickle cell patients to receive treatment elsewhere. Not acceptable. Absolutely. And at that moment, I felt like I made the biggest mistake of my life for entering that hospital. And mind you, I hadn't had a crisis. This was my first crisis in 3 years. So it's been a while. So then she tried to cover it up. When she found out I was a nurse, she said, well, other sickle cell patients should be more like you. So, because clearly I don't know your face, so you must not admit a lot for pain medicine. So she tried to make it like I was better than other sickle cell patients. And because I was a nurse and I don't admit often. So me and my husband immediately went into, you do recognize this is a DNA issue. A person can take care of themselves and know all their triggers and know all the protocols to typically take, and you can still end up hospitalized. And mind you, I have as needed pain medication at home. So, and I have regular insurance. However, I'm going to have a heck of a bill. So I try my best not to come into a hospital unless I truly need it. And so when she found out I was a nurse, I almost became worthy to her to call the doctor to get my IV pain medication back. I was denied oxygen for 3 days. They said, oh, your saturation levels are not low enough. They're never low, but oxygen is treatment to help uncluster these cells that are hard and stuck in my blood vessels. So I was in distress 3 days, crying, lost my voice 3 days straight, just begging for help, pleading for help, like give me the correct treatment. Very low doses of pain medication was given, to the point where no longer to have the chest pain. Now this crisis had moved to my left arm. And this is essentially extending my stay in the whole hospital system. What is it about shorter length of stay? They were extending my stay because of refusal to treat me properly and aggressively. So by the 3rd day, I'm crying. This statement about it did not just come from this one nurse. 2, I did follow up and ask a couple other nurses, because it wouldn't leave my mind. Like, is it really true you guys don't want sickle cell patients here? So you're trying to decrease what they give you for pain? 2 other nurses verified this information. So it's not like, I've had meetings, I'll get into it. I've had meetings with the hospital administration following this, because I emailed the president of the system. I was not playing. And so they've been, getting together, they've had meetings, and they let me know that these nurses misspoke, and that was not the point of their meetings. But it's hard to believe when there was 3 different ones saying the same thing. So I think there's some truth. It just wasn't meant to come out, and I wasn't meant to hear it. That's what it was.
Well, I got a question for you too. There's different types of sickle cell, like the SS disease and the SBO and the SC. What's the difference in these? Are they treated differently? Do they have different symptoms?
So typically, SC and SS is the two most common ones. And that means one parent carries the SS and the other one carries the SC. And these are basically deformities in the hemoglobin that causes the shape of the red blood cells. They are treated exactly the same, just typically, but everyone could be different. One is hospitalized. The SS is usually considered more critical, the ones that they give with the sooner, death rate, the ones they say that you're not going to be able to attend college. That's SS. And then SC means you have more hemoglobin and you're more normal red blood cells. So you shouldn't be as sick as often because the cells won't get stuck in the blood vessels as often because you have enough oxygenation in your blood where you don't necessarily have to go into sickle cell crisis as much. But there are people with SC who go into crisis just as much as those who have SS. But typically, the treatments are pretty similar. There are more medications now that you can take that they've come out with to help with increase what's called fetal hemoglobin. And fetal hemoglobin in your system is very beneficial. And that's how I found out how I've been able to get through life with minimum crisis, because my body didn't get rid of the fetal hemoglobin when I was a baby. So I still carry a nice amount in my system. And this fetal hemoglobin provides more oxygen to the red blood cells and it prevents the cells from sticking. And some of the medications that are out for sickle cell disease are designed to help boost up, create more fetal hemoglobin in the sickle cell patient system to prevent less hospitalizations and crisis. So it's kind of with any care, I'll be honest, any care should be individualized with your doctor, because what may work for me may not work for Mr. Chris, may not work for Mr. Andre. And then we may have some similarities in what works. And that's the best way I can answer that.
Well, thank you. We appreciate all the knowledge that you have brought out tonight, on an RN standpoint. We'd like to ask all the panelists too, if they can join in on the rest of these questions, or it's just a regular comment. If you have something specific that you want to say along the way to help us understand more about the sickle cell disease. We want to know some myths that we've heard about, some myths that's not, really true about sickle cell. And I think Cassandra Adams has a question as well.
Yes, there was a question for Chris. The question was, what does stem cell transplant do for sickle cell patients?
Well, stem cell, your body actually produces it. And as a baby, like babies produce stem cells more so than we do. So what they do is mimic like other cells or other makeup in your body. So the stem cell transplant pretty much, in my case, well, the first time I had to have low dose chemo and radiation, which pretty much wipes out your immune system and starts you all over as you are a newborn. So the stem cells, which I received from the first time was from my mother, it mimicked her DNA. She has a trait. So after having zero immunity to anything, my immune system started from scratch. So I pretty much developed her immune system. So for the first couple of months, they monitored to make sure that the trait or the sickle cell actually was gone. And thank God during the first few months of the first transplant, the sickle cells weren't present. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out as we had hoped the first time, because sickle cell came back about 6 months out from, when I was discharged. But the second time, they used my father, and same process, except for they took a drug out and added a new one, but it was high dose chemo radiation. So again, it was zero immune system. And it started again, and I took my dad's immune system. Again, he has trait as well, but I don't know what they did along the process to remove you know, the sickle cell like makers in the stem cells, but when they put the stem cells in, they start fast as I don't just copy it. And it just copied his healthy cells without the sickle, like trait or anything. So it just pretty much copies the person who donated to you. It copies their genetic makeup or immune system.
Amazing. That's amazing and really interesting to know. Is there any other type of treatment that they have out there for sickle cell patients? And also, is it very expensive to get help, or is there assistance programs that are available?
Well, it was from my experience. Both times I had pretty good insurance, so insurance covered majority of it. That included all of the testing I had to go through, which was very, very advanced testing where they test for all the genetic makeups and precursors to diseases and make sure you aren't, pre-genetically disposed to catching or, getting something over time. But other treatment options that I've actually gone through before the transplants were blood transfusions from the time I was 5 after my first stroke. And then I would go every couple months or every few weeks, every 2 to 4 weeks based on what my red cell count looked like or my white blood cell count looked like. And that was the determining factor of how many units or bags of blood I received. And then I learned later on in life, unfortunately, that the transfusions weren't the best route for me because they were supposed to prevent further strokes. And I had 3 more strokes after I had started the transfusion therapy. So when I got to Nashville, my hematologist down there said that the best option was a blood exchange, which is pretty much dialysis, where your blood is pumped through the system and it cleans it out, and then it puts the new blood in you. So it lasted longer, and I felt better, even though it was an all-day process. So after that, we explored other routes, and I was presented with the transplant option. So I read the information myself, and then I presented it to my family, and they left that decision up to me. So blood exchanges and transfusions and hydroxyurea are options.
This is open to any panelists. Why is it that sometimes some people have more severe cases of sickle cell and some don't?
If I could take a little bit of that, I think Felicia, I think I'm pronouncing your name right. I hope I am. Felicia alluded to it, and I'm sure she would be the utmost authority on this call, but from my training, and I think also LaSharde and I share that we are trained community health. We have a lot in common. She's trying to be like me. I'm just kidding. But we were trained to understand, and Dr. Sherney is the one who trained me this way from the great state of Michigan, is that sickle cell disease is like a snowflake. There's no snowflake that is the same. It may be the same things, snowflakes are snowflakes, it is the same thing, but they do not look the same. There's no snowflake that ever looks the same. And so even though we have the same disease, it manifests itself differently in every person. And then even more so, it manifests itself differently with each genotype. And you asked a question, and to brush up, I think, and I think LaSharde can check me. I think there are hundreds of genotypes that we have of sickle cell disease, but the most prevalent ones, I think it's maybe like 7, 8, or 9 that are like the most prevalent ones, but there are technically hundreds.
Yeah, there's over 250 different hemoglobinopathies.
250. So there's several different ways that sickle cell disease can manifest. And then even with someone, I have SS genotype, someone else who has SS, who may be a male, who may be 32, who may be very, very similar to me can still manifest differently. And then I've even seen, and I think Dr. Shani also taught one of these courses about how there can be twins with sickle cell disease and they still have different manifestations of the same disease. So again, no one is going to be different. I know some people who did not have any symptoms or issues until they became adults, or people like me who had severe symptoms as a child, and then as adulthood kind of came in and more medications came out and things like that, they were able to have a little bit better quality of life. It's all very different. And that's why we always say that you really have to find a groove between your care team, your doctor, your social worker, your nurse, whoever's on your care team, to know what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and stay on that protocol. The regimen that I'm on, I've been on for almost 20 years, and it works. And so why fix something that's not broken? And so that's one of the biggest things that I try to tell people when it comes to this conversation. But yeah, to answer your question, no person with sickle cell is the same, even if they have the same genotype.
Okay, and also I want to ask, these questions are open to all the panelists, so feel free to jump in there and say what you want to say. Are they still doing research to find out better ways to help everyone, and are people still dying from this disease at a terrible rate, or even at a different age? Are their ages, are they living longer?
Well, I can answer that as well. There is a lot of research still being done, and COVID actually kind of opened up a lot more doors for sickle cell patients, because there's a lot of different there's so many phases that's going on for different medications. So COVID is kind of like a blessing a little bit. I kind of look at it for sickle cell patients, because there's a lot of similarities with COVID and sickle cell, and how, especially with acute chest syndrome, as they were speaking of earlier. But patients are actually living much longer because of the advances. I think the oldest patient that I know of right now in Ohio is 75 or so. So that's a really big deal, because in the 70s, they weren't living past 14, 15 years old. So now here it is, 2021, there's a lot of advances, one being, for most people, hydroxyurea. That was a medication that was originally used for cancer patients, but it worked best in sickle cell patients. It increased that fetal hemoglobin, and that's just one form. And then of course adding penicillin. That was something that they had started doing. They shown the first 5 years of the child's life, they should be on penicillin. So that increased the rates of people not dying, so soon, to keep from catching those different infections and things like that. So yeah, they are living relatively as normal, as we say, as possible, creating normalcy. I believe in empowering them, especially at a young age. I think that changes the whole perspective of patients of life. I don't tell my children what they can't do. I just tell them, they have to be mindful. It's the words that we use, words of affirmation. I'm very big on that. So I speak positivity in them every day. And I'm always telling them what they can do, but they just have to be mindful of some of those, activities that may make them tired.
And what about insurance? Is it a cost factor, or do they cover most of it?
So,
a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, it's some things that cost, but fortunately for me, right now, it's okay. So it's this thing of adolescent care to adult care. So things change. As soon as you hit that adult care, is totally different. I always say, adolescence, everything is glorified over there. So you don't want or need for anything, like everything is taken care of. But soon as you hit that transition age, that is where everything just blows up, Although I personally haven't experienced it yet, maybe the those that are on the panel that actually live with this can kind of attest to it. I just know it from the professional stance that there is a lot of cost with medication that's not covered. Andre, you want to speak on that?
Well, I wanted to give Felicia or Chris an opportunity because y'all know I could talk, so.
It definitely does change though, going from adolescence to adulthood. I remember just going to pick up one of my prescriptions for the transplant, and they told me that insurance didn't cover it. I think one of my pills out of the 30 that I was on cost like $500 to $700 just for one. But I'm like, it's supposed to be free. But then I had to remember, I'm not a child anymore. So now here comes the price tag. And we ended up finding, alternative, medications that did the same thing, or generic form is or what they're going to call it. But it's definitely glorified as a kid because, like Lasharte said, it's out of sight, out of mind. We don't think about it. But when you get that first bill and it takes your breath away, and you just throw it over your shoulder like I can't do this right now. It's different.
Anybody else on that?
We have a question.
Go ahead.
The question is, have other panelists experienced poor treatment for medical staff?
Felicia, you want to say something? No?
Hello.
Okay, go ahead.
She's on mute. She's on mute.
Throughout my,
Felicia, you're on mute.
I'm off mute now. Okay, I turned it off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you able to? Okay. I'm just having some poor connection issues. So yes, this recent hospitalization that I was explaining, it didn't stop there throughout my stay. I had a particular day where one nurse, even though I was crying, even though I was talking about how much pain I was in, I did try non-pharmacological treatment. I had a heating pad, which does help with when I'm alone to work without the correct pain medication. Everything I asked for, she kept referring to me wanting to be high. You can't have this because you'll feel high. It was so disrespectful. It was very dehumanizing. I don't have a history of drug seeking. I don't have a history of being out of a drug rehab. I don't have no stating that they're suspecting that I may have substance abuse. None of these things. But because I was a sickle cell patient and she was burned out, is what I call it. Everything was like almost like she was taking it out on me, the issues she has with sickle patients. She starts to, and I begged them, one particular thing, reference, I work in this hospital system. So and when I joined the system,
Felicia, are you by a telephone or something that you're going in and out? We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Now.
Oh, okay. All right, so I consciously changed all my providers to be in the same network of systems because I know I have this disease that when I do have flare-ups, they hit and they hit really hard. So I wanted everyone to have access to my charts and it won't be a situation where, oh, she's in a different hospital system, so we don't know if she's compliant. We don't know what labs have been done. We don't know what x-rays been done. I wanted everything to be on hand for continuity of care. It meant nothing for the system. They would not check my charts. I was denied 3 times to even contact my hematologist because they would have told you exactly what helps, what works for me. I asked for Benadryl and I was accused of wanting to be high for IV Benadryl. to the resident a particular night, and my husband said, why won't you guys, this is night 3. And at this point, we're angry. I'm ready to transfer out. I didn't care what hospital I went to. I just didn't want to be there. So they were trying to do damage control and begging me to stay. But in one breath, they're asking me to stay. But in the next breath, the physician.
Did we lose her? Oh, okay. There she is. Felicia? We can't hear you.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Is that better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I'll wrap it up since okay. So yeah. And he told my husband, no, I'm not going to call our hematologist because we're supposed to be able to manage her pain. So I don't want to get yelled at. So his own pride was in the way of him doing what was best for the treatment for myself. So it just goes to show it doesn't matter who you are, and trust and believe. I said, if they're treating me like that and they know I am within the system, I do, I will be able to have access to contact the proper people, during this hospitalization.
I think she went out on us again. Okay. Yes, I think she went out on us again. I noticed sickle cell can change throughout someone's life. I know everyone, most of the time when they have sickle cell, they're born with it. But they say symptoms of the babies and toddlers is yellow, jaundice, and white eyes. And also it occurs in the red blood cells that break apart, and fatigue and fuzziness, painful swelling in the hands and the feet, not making enough red blood cells, and blood getting trapped and starting infections. And for us teens and young adults, the teens may develop leg ulcers, vascular necrosis, I can't even say it, sorry. It's where the bone tissue it happens with the lack of the blood supply, acute chest syndromes, and eye damage. So some of the panelists mentioned that they didn't see symptoms until later on in life, and some had it earlier. Is there a reason why some see it better in the younger age as opposed to waiting later on and then they get more symptoms? Is it because they're the eating habits or what they do?
I can respond to that. So one of the things, again, as I will continue to tout my training from Dr. Sherney, but one of the things that we were taught also, and just things that you learn as someone with this disease, is that until about 2 years old, you keep your fetal hemoglobin, as Felicia mentioned. I think 2 is like the extreme cutoff of when most people don't produce it anymore. But so that's when 2 is around the age that a lot of babies start experiencing a lot of symptoms. That does not say that they don't experience symptoms before or after, of course. And then also with testing mandates, only for some states being just at 30 years, some being a little over, but for those that are, the millennial age group, I'm 32, there's a couple of people in their mid 30s, early 40s who were born before mandates were passed for newborn screening. Then they probably were not tested. They may have SC or another, and I cautiously say milder form, because as I said before, we all manifest differently. So SC is thought to be a milder form, but it can and manifest in someone else very differently. But there are people I know, someone, and she's actually a medical doctor, but she wasn't diagnosed with sickle cell until she was well into adulthood, because she was born, I think, in the 70s, 60s or 70s. I can't remember. And was not aware of her status. So a lot of that plays into it. Diet, I think a lot of people, when they think, I will mention this, like diet, of course, influences anybody's health, regardless of what you have. But I think a lot of people think of sickle cell as it being something like diabetes, like if we eat a donut, we're gonna pass out, or if we don't eat, we're gonna pass. Like it does not, that's not how it works. However, diet is necessary and is important for anyone to take a watch over, but there's really no dietary changes that would just throw you into some type of crisis or some type of detrimental experience with sickle cell disease. And that's something I have to tell a lot of people, because they may see me at Popeyes and be like, are you gonna get sick? Like, I'm just eating, like, calm down. And while I'm talking, I just wanted to address, like I said, I like to step back and let people talk, because I know I could talk. But I will say, as Felicia was addressing the discrimination, and I think most sickle cell patients experience discrimination in the emergency room and the emergency department setting, which is most of the places I've experienced it in. But I lived 16 years in a more rural city in North Carolina, and I was a patient at Duke University, but I lived an hour away. So if I was ever in a crisis, you can't drive an hour away while you're in a crisis. When you call an ambulance, they're not going to automatically take you to a hospital hour away. They're going to take you to a local hospital. And so the care locally was terrible. And there were times where I would be in the emergency room. The time I mentioned before, when I had acute chest and I was around my 21st birthday, and you all can check my sources, my parents can confirm that I was in the waiting room, not in triage, not checked in, not any of that. I was in the waiting room waiting to be triaged for 20 hours in the middle of a sickle cell crisis. And I could have died there. And I actually know sickle cell patients who have died waiting in the waiting room, waiting for care. There is a shift, and this is one of the reasons that inspired me to become a PhD student. We have to shift the way that we think and treat sickle cell disease. There is no way to divorce racism and the way sickle cell disease is treated in this country. No, it is not a Black disease, but in this country, it disproportionately, and I use the word disproportionately strategically, affects African Americans. And because it disproportionately affects African Americans, there's no way you can ignore the racial issues that we face in the clinical setting. As Felicia stated, I had a nurse who was actually from, I think, one of the islands like Turks and Caicos, and I asked her for pain medicine, and she brought me Tylenol. She said, well, where I'm from, we give our sickle cell patients Tylenol and they're able to handle it. Y'all here in the United States, y'all too soft. Anti-Black racism, it doesn't matter who it comes from. And the racism runs deep, how sickle cell is viewed and pictured. There are studies that are out and have been out that shows that medical students believe that Black patients can handle pain more than their non-Black patients. So if they think this, then of course, if you come into the emergency room with the sickle cell crisis, they're not going to give you Dilaudid, they're going to give you Toradol and tell you to go home. And so these are the conversations we have to have, continue to have at the local levels, at the hospital levels, to change how they treat us. Because if we continue to just let them mistreat us, and not saying that people are letting people walk over them, but if we don't make a fuss and we just go home and try to, move on, it's not going to work. It's not going to change. We have to hold these clinical encounters accountable, these doctors, these nurses, x-ray technicians. I mean, I've had it from everywhere. So we have to hold them accountable. We have to hold them accountable for how they treat us, what they say, their actions. Enough is enough. And until we say something is going to continue to perpetuate.
I agree with you. Dr. Collins, Frances Collins always says that before. She told me that several times, that we have to check ourselves and check them. So I do agree with you. And I wanted to ask you too, because of someone having amnesia, if children with sickle cell, do they grow slower paced than other children through puberty or anything? Can you tell me if there's any truth or comments on that?
Is that directed to me, you said?
To any panelist,
Okay.
any panelist. Do they grow any different than any other child?
Chris, you want to take a stab at that?
I mean, for me, I went through puberty around the same time everybody else did. My height comes from my parents. My dad, I think, is like 6'1". My mom is like 5'1". So I think I'm about 5'8", between 5'8" and 5'10". And I went through it like everybody else did. So I mean, I got my height based off my parents, my genetic makeup. But to touch back on the whole diet stuff, I played every sport you can. I did karate, basketball, baseball. I swam. So for me, I wasn't really affected by sickle cell crisis, but I was active. I love fruits and vegetables, and my brother suffered more of the crisis than I did, but he wasn't as active as I was, and he had, I believe, a different form of sickle cell than I had at the time. But yeah, puberty was fine. I literally went through it along with everybody else.
Well, that's good to hear too. And we notice a strength in each one of you and how you're handling it. And I guess it's a mindset. If your mind frame is the right, right thing, then it does help. Does anyone have any other questions to ask our panelists, or does any comments the panelists want to share that we have not covered?
There was one additional question in the chat from Stephanie Gamble.
Yeah, we have one that says, is sickle cell trait passed through numerous generations, or does it stop after a certain number?
It don't stop. If you have trait, it continuously get passed on.
So so for me, I am a trait carrier. My husband is a trait carrier. So there's a 50% chance that we could, there's a 1 out of 4 chance of having a child with sickle cell disease. There's a 50% chance for possibly having a child with trait. So and that's in every pregnancy. So let me make that very clear. That's in every pregnancy. So that's why we ended up with 2 kids with sickle cell disease. Because people think, oh, okay, 1. I had 1. So it's in every pregnancy. That's why we got 4 boys, 2 of them have sickle cell disease. So.
Okay.
And also, I just want to mention, this is something I hear a lot, and just if Stephanie's still listening, I know a lot of people in my family thinks that for some reason, genetic things skip generations. That's not how sickle cell works. Nothing skips a generation. If you have the trait, you have the trait, and you can pass that to your offspring. There's nothing. That's not how genetics work. We're not skipping that's not how sickle cell trait works. It's going, like she said, with each pregnancy, you have a probability. And if you all remember biology, we used to do Punnett squares. You can do a Punnett square to figure out the probability. But I wanted to say that because I hear that a lot from even not too long ago, my grandma said something about, well, luckily your grandkids won't have sickle cell because it's no, that's not how that works. But just wanted to say that.
Well, no, we appreciate your comments and everything. LaSharday, is there anything you want to say to wrap it up?
No, but I would like for you to allow the panelists to kind of, because I don't know if we have sickle cell patients on the call, but just to kind of leave at least a word of empowerment for those patients, because sometimes, a lot of sickle cell patients do not have support system. It's just fortunately everybody on this call has a support system, but there are a lot of patients that do not have support systems, so they're alone. They're going through this by themselves.
Well, that's a good comment. And I wanted to share that LaSharday Scott is to be reached at the Neighborhood Health Association on Jefferson Avenue, 313 Jefferson Avenue. So if anyone wants
1415.
It's 1415
Mm-hmm.
in the next building. Okay. So your office, if you like to give your phone number, your contact number.
It's 419-214-5700, extension 5028.
And as stated earlier, our organizations are really working hard to keep Toledo community and the surrounding areas informed about different things that are important to the community. And we hope that everyone took something from this today and hope that we will see you to join us on other programs that we're having, like Triple the Pink, which is a breast cancer awareness on Sunday, October the 17th from 3 o'clock. And also domestic violence presentation on Thursday, October 28th at 7 o'clock. We want to thank our panelists for all that they have given us today. And we're going to leave here with a closing remarks. Claire Petty. I can't hear you.
Sorry. LaSharday, Eric, Andre, Felicia, Chris, thank you so much for spending your evening educating us. And what a powerful evening it really has been. I hope that all of our guests was able to gain additional knowledge about sickle cell and that they will carry this knowledge into our community. I also like to thank this collaboration, ABC Healthcare, Toledo chapter of the Links Incorporated, Negro Business and Professional Women, Toledo Club and the Mommy Bay Club, Top Ladies of Distinction, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the YWCA, and Phi Delta Kappa. And everybody have a good evening. Thank you so much.
And thank you again. Have a
And
pleasant evening.
excuse me, can everyone please complete the evaluation in the chat? Thank you very much.
I clicked on the chat and it's not coming up, Lexi. I see the link, but it didn't come up.
I was able to get it, Denise.
I know I clicked on it. It says forms. Wait a minute, it's changing now. Wait a minute, let's see. There it is. It came up. It finally came up.
Okay.